A Conversation with a Veteran is a program of the Westford Museum and Historical Society to conduct interviews of the Westford's Korean and Vietnam veterans. This project is sponsored by the Massachusetts State Historical Records Advisory Board, Veterans Heritage Grant Project.
Hi, my name is Ezra Berson. I'm a senior at Westford Academy, class of 2023, and a Capstone intern at the Westford Museum. I will be attending Framingham State University in the fall, and I will be majoring in history.
And I am Kendra Ruan, also a senior at Westford Academy, class of 2023, and a Capstone intern at the Westford Museum. I'm looking forward to majoring in business administration at Northeastern University.
The Westford Academy Senior Capstone Experience provides seniors with the opportunity to apply what they've learned in school to the real world. Students pursue an internship in a local business or community service for the fourth quarter of their senior year. Today we're speaking with Jim Clark. Mr. Clark served in the Navy as a top secret officer on the 7th Fleet Staff Commander during the Vietnam War. Today he's a dedicated and beloved teacher at Westford Academy.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm more than happy to talk about my experience with the Navy. I served for more than 20 years in the Navy. First 4 years active duty in Japan, working out of Yokosuka Naval Base and patrolling with the 7th Fleet, and later in Japan at a command there. After that, I served in the reserves.
Yeah, and what brought you into the Navy?
I'd always been interested in the Navy and in the military. As a student at North Denver High School, I was in the junior ROTC program for 4 years, really. And then at the same time, in the evenings and on weekends, I was active with the Civil Air Patrol. So I had Army and Air Force experience while I was in high school, and there was no opportunity to do anything with the Navy in Colorado, but I was interested in the Navy particularly because my brother, my half-brother, considerably older than I am, was he was a chief in the U.S. Navy.
Where were you first assigned to after completing your initial training?
Okay, well, I should mention that I always wanted to be in the Navy. I wanted to be a naval officer because I was going to go to college, and I tried to get into Annapolis. My eyesight disqualified me. I had poor eyesight. It disqualified me for Annapolis. Also, at the same time, I could not pass the physical for West Point. I went to college at Tufts. There was a naval ROTC program there, and I should have joined it, but I knew that after 2 years in that program, I'd have a physical, and my eyesight, they would probably bounce me out, and so I didn't join naval ROTC in college. But after college, I went to graduate school. I was at Columbia School of International Affairs in the early 60s. I was there during the Cuban Missile Crisis, in fact, but I still considered the possibility of becoming a naval officer. So I joined the Naval Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island, and I graduated from there. I passed the eye exam by hook or crook. The corpsman, I think that was a point. See, that would have been 65. I think they weren't so concerned. They were anxious to get any warm body into the military at that point, and they weren't concerned with my eyesight, fortunately. So I became an ensign upon graduation, and they assigned me immediately, again in Newport, Rhode Island, to communications school, crypto school. It was crypto analysis school. So I was trained to deal with equipment, dealing with crypto activities, and that's how, when I was then assigned to the staff of the 7th Fleet Commander aboard the flagship, the USS Oklahoma City, was assigned there initially as a top secret officer. All the new ensigns coming aboard into the communications department were top secret officers. So I was a watchstander as top secret officer. That is to say, I would have 2 days on watch and then 2 days off. For example, I would arrive, as I recall, for an eve watch, which would be from like 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. The next day I'd have a day watch, which would be from, I think, 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. And then the next day I would have a mid-watch, which was from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, and then I'd be off. That cycle, we went through that cycle twice, and then I would have time off. Aboard ship, I was also the signal bridge officer, where I would be on the signal bridge where they use flashing light signals, and also they flew signal flags at different points, mostly communicating there with flashing light.
What was your first impression arriving on the ship in that area?
Okay, well, I flew from the Sacramento area to, I think it must have been Tachikawa Air Base in Japan. And I remember then at night we drove through the Japanese countryside to Yokosuka Base, and I was half awake, but I was very impressed with the Japanese villages we passed through. Then aboard ship, we were at Yokosuka Naval Base on the shore, not too far from Tokyo, about maybe 45 minutes, an hour out of Tokyo, and a lot of ships there of different. I was assigned to the USS Oklahoma City, a light cruiser. It was a cruiser that had a battery of 5-inch guns and a battery of 6-inch guns, plus air defense missiles and helicopter aboard and so forth. And so we would then go out. Typically we would be in port for about 2 weeks and then out of port traveling for 8 weeks, and we would spend much of our time in what we call the Tonkin Gulf Yacht Club off the coast of Vietnam. Sometimes we were on Yankee Station operating with the carriers. There would typically be 2 or 3 aircraft carriers on Yankee Station, but then we also worked along the coast at night, and during the day we would provide gunfire support to Marines and Army units who needed support, artillery support. We would use our 5- and 6-inch guns to support them. At night, often we would steam up the coast along Route 1, which ran along the coast, and if there were convoys, military, either Army or Marine convoys going up Route 1, we would go alongside the coast, along the coast, to support them if they had any problems. We provided gunfire support, and so my impression of Vietnam was initially from the sea. I was not inland. Only once was I on Vietnamese territory, but it was very lush. It was beautiful land. They had beaches and places that were just gorgeous, beautiful beaches. I remember one cove where there was I think a French plantation owner's villa above it, on a bluff above this cove, but it was an idyllic spot. So I was impressed with the beauty of the Vietnamese coast, but we did not have a lot of interaction. There were times when we participated in air assaults on Viet Cong sites in Vietnam, where we would be involved with. There would be amphibious ships and other ships involved with helicopters carrying Marines ashore. And so we did have operations like that we participated in, but we were never, most of the people aboard ship were never on shore in Vietnam. We were aboard ship.
What did you do in the Navy, or after your time in Vietnam, or around Vietnam?
Well, while I was on the 7th Fleet staff as a communicator, I was a top secret officer, as I mentioned. All the ensigns coming out of comm school and out of crypto school were top secret officers. So that aboard ship there was an area called main comm, that is an area where there were maybe 30 or 40 people operating communications. They got unclassified, confidential, and secret messages that they processed and then managed to get them to different people on the staff that needed the information. Some might be about logistics, some might be about operations, and so forth. As a top secret officer, I had a compartment off main comm, a little area that was set up where I would decipher top secret messages. The top secret messages were handled separately, and I had a device that I used to decipher them. And then after I deciphered a top secret message, it was my responsibility to take that message to the Admiral, the commander of the 7th Fleet, and sometimes to his chief of staff. It sometimes was a little sticky because some of the chiefs of staff wanted to see the message before the Admiral did, so they would know what was going on. But generally, it went directly to the Admiral. And this was true aboard ship. We'd take it to the Admiral's quarters aboard ship, or if we were in port at Yokosuka or at some other port, we would get a car. A car would be assigned for us to take the message to the Admiral's quarters or wherever the Admiral was staying. But it was a message that had to be sent, had to be seen directly by the Admiral, and he would initial it to make sure that to certify that he had seen the top secret message. Top secret messages were often about specific military operations, such as they had Rolling Thunder was a military air operation to interdict traffic moving down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But then if we had a special operation, like I mentioned, there was an air assault that was done against a site along the Vietnamese coast. That would have been a top secret message. All the planning for that would be top secret, that the Admiral had to know about, but other people did not have to know about. So we also operated with the command staff, which in addition to the Admiral, there was an entire staff made up of officers who dealt with all sorts of issues, air operations, as well as logistics and intelligence and other activities. And so we often interacted with them, but the messages, the top secret messages, went initially to the Admiral or his chief of staff.
So what did you do after your time on the 7th Fleet?
Okay, after I had 2 years with the 7th Fleet staff, 1 year on the USS Oklahoma City, and then the staff changed the flag. The flag was changed to another ship, the USS Providence. And so after a year on the Oklahoma City and a year on the Providence, I was fortunate to have a reassignment to shore duty in Japan. That is very fortunate indeed. So I was assigned to the PACOM Elent Center at Fuchu, Japan. That is the Pacific Command Electronic Intelligence Center at Fuchu, Japan. That was a former Japanese air base, and then the head of the 5th Air Force Command in Japan. The Electronic Intelligence Center was responsible for maintaining an electronic order of battle for North Vietnam, China, and North Korea. So we would use aircraft and ships, intelligence collection ships, that would cruise, would fly or cruise outside the borders and outside the airspace of North Korea, China, and North Vietnam, and they would be there to trigger the air defense radars and the weapon radars for those countries. That meant that they would take recordings of the frequencies and the characteristics of the equipment, the electronic equipment that those countries had, and then it would be put into a database so that when we were planning military actions against North Vietnam, for example, we would know where their radars were, what the characteristics of the radars were, what their ranges were, what frequencies they used, and so forth, so that in many cases we'd be able to jam those radars or evade them if necessary, but we had an electronic order of battle. We knew what our adversaries had along the coast that could threaten our aircraft or our ships. And while I was at the PACOM Elite Center, we had visits by crews of aircraft that carried out these missions and crews of ships that carried out the missions. We had one visit from the electronic personnel from the Pueblo, and shortly after they visited PACOM Elite Center, the Pueblo was actually attacked and captured by the North Koreans. That was a very exciting event, a very distressing event, caused a lot of consternation at the Elite Center because we knew the people who had been on that. They had just been visiting us, but in any case, you can read all about the Pueblo incident. That was a very famous incident. In any case, too, this was a very a good time because it was shore duty, and I was married at this point. My wife and I would often ski in Japan. I learned to ski in Japan. I had a 1962 Toyopet, a used car that I bought. It was one of the first Toyotas. Had suicide doors, they were hinged in the back, and it was bright blue. But we traveled a lot in Japan using that little car, and so we did have a very good experience of working and living in Japan.
What did you do after you came back home to America?
Okay, when I returned to America, I returned to continue studies. I was working on a PhD at Columbia. I studied at Columbia's East Asian Institute. I was studying Chinese at that point, and I became involved with a Naval Intelligence Reserve unit in New York City. And at that point, I was able to change my designator from being a naval line officer to becoming a naval intelligence officer. And so for many years after that, both in New York City, we lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time. In Washington, D.C., I was associated with several reserve units, one of which was at the Naval Command Center in the Pentagon. The Naval Command Center was where the staff that worked for the Chief of Naval Operations worked, and brief the Chief of Naval Operations. My reserve unit once a month would go in and take over the weekend briefings for the CNO, and we had people who briefed on logistics, operations, Soviet submarine activities, and general intelligence activities, and I was the intelligence officer in that unit. For one, we also did, as reservists, 2 weeks training every year. I had 2 weeks in Norfolk, Virginia at a intelligence school, 2 weeks in Denver, Colorado at a photo interpretation school, and for 2 weeks when I was with the Naval Command Center, we had a war game that we participated in, so that during the war game, the reservists, as well as some active duty people, were transported to a secret underground site outside Washington, D.C. And it was a big cavern with facilities inside, and actually there were Quonset huts set on concrete supports and springs that would presumably help them withstand any attack, any explosive attacks. In any case, we were there, and during the war game, but they sent us home a day early from the exercise because, according to the scenario of the war game, we had been attacked. So that was one of the most interesting war games that we had an opportunity to participate in. Later, I also, as a reservist, worked with the Mardez Lant Sector Boston Maritime Defense Zone Atlantic Sector Boston unit that carried out breakouts from Boston Harbor, and we were responsible for security, worked with the state police and with federal agencies to ensure that to support operations against in a Soviet war game. So we participated in those kinds of activities as reservists. So we had some interesting reserve duties and activities during that period.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clark, for talking to us today about your service in the Navy. We may not fully understand all the sacrifices you've had to make, but I can't thank you enough for your service. We don't take our freedoms for granted, and I respect you so much for the part you played.
Thank you.